Welcome to the Institute of Humanities in Africa doctoral seminar series, where these sessions are designed to provide an introduction to the intellectual grounding and guidance on the practical tools of the doctoral journey. My name is Amina Slimani, and I'm a doctoral fellow within HUMA. So just to begin with, in terms of logistics, I would like to mention that many Zoom users have experienced the unfortunate occurrence of Zoom bombing. So to mitigate these issues and to try and reduce the risk as much as possible, we really ask that all participants kindly change their name to their full name and affiliation if possible, or to actually pop these details into the chat box. Otherwise, you might find yourselves temporarily placed in the waiting room. So yeah, please just make sure that you have your full names. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Dominique Somda on the topic Truth-Telling, Secret-Keeping, the Ethics and Politics of Concealment. By way of introduction to our guest speaker, Dominique Somda is a social cultural anthropologist and a junior research fellow at HUMA. She received a PhD in anthropology from the University of Paris-Nanterre as a Laboratoire d'Ethnologie et de Sociologie Comparative member. As a postdoctoral researcher, she held visiting positions at the Fondation des Maisons des Sciences de l'Homme in Paris and at the London School of Economics. She later taught anthropology as a visiting professor at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and Reed College in Portland, Oregon. More recently, she was a traveling faculty with the Comparative Study Abroad programs IHP Cities and IHP Human Rights, which stands for School for International Trading, Brattleboro, Vermont. Her work focuses on how inequality, or conversely, egalitarianism, emerges through everyday practices, a thematic interest that has also led her to engage with the anthropology of slavery, democracy, Christianity, and feminist and post-colonial studies. At HUMA, she explores the religious ethics of artificial intelligence in African faith-based healthcare systems. Dominique, I'm so honored to host you and really thrilled to have you with us today, and very excited for your talk on this topic. And I will now hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amina. I will now try to share my screen. Okay. And can I have it full screen? Or should I do it? Sorry, just a second. Okay. So good evening, everybody. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I must say, I would normally say thank you to my host for inviting me, but actually I have invited myself to this presentation, to this seminar, because today I'm a host. I'm not a host. Amina is a host, but I'm the convener of the seminar, and I'm also the guest. And my co-convener, Angelique Thomas, who is not here today, had made me promise that if we ever had like a slot, an empty slot, I would come and present my own research. So that's what I'm doing today. So I'm grateful that we have this space for me, and that Amina has accepted to step up and to be my host today. So the doctoral seminar and also this session is less about presenting the outcome of a research project that's about theoretical questions and ethical conundrums that emerge at some point of our research journeys. We discuss doctoral and postdoctoral work as researchers, but also as supervisors. And the goal is to be useful to doctoral students and to help them figure out some of the solution to their research problem and the kind of crisis that may emerge. So today we are discussing a recurring dilemma that anthropologists, but probably not only anthropologists, face. And the dilemma is to tell the truth about our research object or to protect our interlocutors and their privacy and dignity. I'm going to discuss various and virtuous aspects of anthropology, but also some choices that may be more problematic and more transgressive. This is a theme that I have discussed a few weeks ago in Paris with colleagues and friends, Jennifer Bidet, a sociologist, and Laura Style, an anthropologist, and they were both preparing the publication, the release of their own books, and they had faced also like some of those problems. So like this is also a presentation that reflects that, you know, this conversation I had with those friends. So I will first discuss the figure of the anthropologist as a truth teller and also a secret keeper. And I will later provide more substance with the example of my own research on the secret of slavery in South Madagascar. So I will take a few detours, and part of my point is that being indirect is part of the trick when you have to unveil secret. So let's start. I want to say something about that first slide. That first slide has is a picture of a miniature from le Musée des Miniatures in Lyon, France, and it's called l'Atelier des Faussaires. So it's like the workshop of the forgers, and I take it as kind of, you know, a note to what anthropologists sometimes feel like they are doing when writing their anthropology, their ethnography. So this is kind of like the different topic I'm going to discuss today, and I will start with the codes of ethics. The codes of ethics are not the last word of what we owe to others on the field, what we owe to our readers, but they're very interesting as they are indicative of some of the discussion, the conversation that happened at the time they are produced. So here are a few examples of the codes of ethics that are used in anthropology. I have chose not randomly, but like kind of randomly. I could have made many other choices, and we can discuss that. One is from the AAA, the American Association of Anthropologists. Another one is from the Anthropology of Southern Africa. And the last one is the Association of Social Anthropologists in the UK. So as you can see, I chose those sections because they're reflecting issues of anonymity and confidentiality. So you can see that there's a great variation in the way that those codes are actually presenting and discussing norms and strategies about how to maintain confidentiality. So you can see that the AAA statement of ethics has a shorter one, and the statement is succinctly framing the question of anonymity as a matter of consent, the wish of the interlocutors. The ASAA Code of Ethics is a little longer and provide more details and reassurance. It cites the necessity of using devices and pseudonyms, for example. So that's something I'm going to discuss later. And finally, the ASA is like the more details kind of recommendation for the anthropologist. It's the most expensive. It not only recognizes the right to privacy, but also the right to anonymity and confidentiality, but present also the challenges that exist for the anthropologist as they navigate different legal and cultural universes. The three examples have in common that they manifest the importance of concealment to protect confidentiality, but also the difficulty to effectively dissimulate and the necessity to let the interlocutors know that we may fail, that we try, but we try in the best of our abilities, and that's specified in some of those codes, but that we may fail. So they are very much about the limitations of our strategies. So I'll come back later to some of those, to some elements of the codes, and I will add another reference to another one. I want to say a few words about trust and about what it is to build trust as an anthropologist. How do we provide our readership and also our interlocutors on the field with enough indication that we are truth tellers, that we are deserving the trust that we are asking them to give us? I'm just going to have give a quick reference to James Clifford and his famous article on the authority in ethnography, and because I think it gives us an idea of how we do that and how we have been doing that. And of course, his article is a criticism of the authority as it was constructed in classical monographs, but it's still quite interesting. Like what he's saying in this article is that part of the way that we are creating trust is through our textual practices, and for example, the references to experiences and experience as being something that is quite elusive and difficult to pin down. But he's saying that the anthropologist is able to give the feeling of authority, or the perception of authority through an ineffable feel about the people he's talking about. And later in the article, he's discussing, for example, and citing the mastery of language, the language of the anthropologist, and also the art of the citation that constitute some of the many devices or ways through which the anthropologists try to appear trustworthy. I also want to say a few things about Freud. Freud, that's the opposite of being a truth teller, and truth telling is, of course, truth telling is central to our academic practices as professors, as students, as professors. Lying, fabricating evidences is considered as scholarly misconduct and is addressed as such. But more lies are really disrupting the relationship between authors and readers, and between ethnographers and their interlocutors and the communities in general, the communities that the ethnographers and their interlocutors are part of. So I'd like to cite another excerpt from a code of ethics. And this time it's a European code of ethics. It's entitled Research Ethics in Ethnography and Anthropology. And the lines I'm going to read are from a section that is entitled Deceiving to Protect. And it examines the example of an anthropologist that worked in Indonesia and was extremely involved in the politics of the community there against the state, and admitted to have lied in a trial to protect the people she was doing ethnography about. And here's what the code is saying about that. More importantly, the researcher has contravened some basic ethical principles. By lying to achieve her research goals, she has contaminated the field. Thus, if she can lie to gain access to a research subject, why should we assume she will not lie about her research finding or in her concluding report? If she is capable capable of lying once, might she not be capable of lying in order to color her research in a direction favorable to her perspectives, opinion, and research career? So who can trust her now? So that's like what's essential about lying and about trust, right? That's you know, the kind of pact of trust that we are breaking, and the rupture that's endangered the entire journey. Another point that I wanted to make is about being truth-teller as being witnesses, bearing witness to suffering and to injustices. Truth-telling is a moral imperative in many cases when we are observing, or we are witness of crime, of you know, inequalities, the necessity of telling the stories and naming what's happening, naming the victims and naming the aggressors seems central to the work, and sometimes we are transformed as ethnographers as those witness in a transformative process that also affect the communities within which we work. And what I wanted to, the point that I want to make is that becoming witness also transform the interlocutors and the communities into victims. And that's a point that Didier Fassin is making in a very interesting article entitled "The Humanitarian Politics of Testimony, Subjectification Through Trauma." And that's a text in which he discussed the politics of testimony that define the truth of the victims. And he stated one of the consequences of the subjectification of the victims is that we lose the history and the complexity of the history of the individuals and the communities. So it's not, becoming witness as ethnographers is not without consequences and serious consequences within the communities. Okay, so now let me talk about secret keeping. And I just, okay, sorry, there's a typo here, confidentiality. But anyway, I want just to give examples of keepers of secrets among ethnographers. And I'm also a keeper of secrets, so you know, I say a little more when I'm discussing my own ethnography. So there's many, like, ethnography and the history of anthropology is full of examples of secrets being told to ethnographers and ethnographers writing about them. But they have also tried to keep the secrets while at the same time unveiling something about them. And we have the example, for example, of the very famous ethnography, Guardians of the Flute. Maybe like the folks here today that are not ethnographers might not know about the text, but the one who've done ethnography or I've read about the history of anthropology know what I'm talking about. So Gilbert Hurt has written about a ritual secret about masculinity that was very confidential, and he learned it about, I think, 22 months of field work. And he made it like the center of his work on sexuality and intimacy and masculinity. And like what he did, because he definitely said a lot of what was secret. So what he did was to give to the group amongst which he was doing his ethnography a pseudonym. So if you've read Gilbert Hurt, the name of the group that is in the title of the book is the Sambia. The Sambia, they don't exist. It's a pseudonym. It's a rare case where, you know, like the indicator of place and, you know, And the name of people is changed, and not just the one village, but the entire ethnic group. So it becomes unrecognizable by people read a book. So that's one example. Another more recent example is from Deborah Puccio-Den, that just published a book entitled Mafia Craft, an ethnography of deadly science. And that's as the name indicates, an ethnography of the mafia. And the way she has written about the mafia, the mob in Italy, was to not focus necessarily on the crimes, but on the silence on the presence of the absence. So that's the focus of her work is invisibility and irrepresentability of the secret. And that's something that a lot of ethnographers of the secret have in common. They are writing about an absence and not about, about something that is salient. Okay, so now let me discuss renaming. So renaming is a very common practice to preserve confidentiality, simple confidentiality of data, but also true secrets. They concern people and places, and sometimes also, the distortion also affects entire biographies. So pseudonyms, I'm going to start with them. So pseudonyms, we all use them in fiction and in ethnography. So the question of renaming is important. We have very different strategies. It's a common practice to rename many interlocutors and occasional interlocutors and participants. We invent new names. Sometimes we choose names that are that sound familiar for the area, to still give the taste of authenticity that James Clifford was discussing, not losing the trustworthiness while we are lying about the name of people. But in general, we let know the reader that's what we are doing. And also sometimes we use puns, like I don't know, I've seen like Asaa, a fellow Malgashisan in the room a little earlier, but I don't know if she's still here, but that's sometimes what we do. I don't really do that, but I know like some of my colleagues that do like that include a lot of puns, sometimes, in a language that most of the readers wouldn't understand. The problem with pseudonyms is that you often want or desire to include something that make the person recognizable to you only, but you have to be careful that it's not absolutely not recognizable by others. So when you invent names, you have to, it's sometimes easier to make them like meaningless and also like totally random. So this is not the choice I made for most of the time. I use occasionally pseudonyms, but what I use are cryptonyms mostly. And so I tend to use pseudonyms to name like, to name people when there's absolutely no like possible negative consequences. So I can use pseudonyms. But when you'll see what I mean when I talk about groups that are allegedly descendants of slaves, or like the target or the object of other rumors. Like where I work, there's a lot of people that are like accused to be zombies, like to be like some kind of ghosts that walk around people like if they were still alive. So when I'm talking about the people that are object of gossip, I use cryptonyms. So the cryptonyms have to signal a secret. That means that you don't reveal the secrets, but you indicate that by the morphology of the word, that actually this name is trying to conceal a secret. And that's why they are called cryptonyms, right? They are letting you know, the reader know, that there is a falsification of a name in order to protect a secret. So in my dissertation, for example, like 10 years ago, I was combining often like prefixes that Malagasy prefixes that are very common to name like descendant of groups, and in Malagasy it's Zafi, like grandchildren of. So that's a lot of like names of clans would begin by that prefix, and I would add Greek. A letter of the Greek alphabet, because everybody knows that it's not a real name, right? So that's a cryptonym. That means, look at this, I'm writing about a secret. Another thing that people often do, and are biographical changes. So sometimes when you want to talk about a particular person involved in a particular situation, you change a few elements of the biography: the gender, class, location, age, occupations. This is very tricky, because what you lose when you change the biographical change is the opportunity for the reader to understand fully, like, how the person is involved in certain action. So this is something that I don't like to do. In my the entire history of what I've done, I've only used that once, because I absolutely wanted to use certain examples, because I felt it was very important for the reader to understand what I was saying. But it was absolutely necessary for me that the person wouldn't be recognizable. That's something that you should discuss with colleagues. That's often something that emerge, little changes, and everybody is taking that quite seriously. It's very complicated. So of course there's the potential problems when you do that, right? So the problem is that the truth become unverifiable. Sorry, I can't pronounce that in English. When you change like names, locations, gender, or whatever element you want to change from a particular person, like how is it not a falsification? Is it a fiction? What's happening to the truth you're trying to share? And what happened to the accountability of the researcher? So those are like real problems. And as I was like thinking about this presentation, I was reminded of the scandal that happened a few years ago with the book of Alice Goffman, On the Run: Fugitive Life in an American City. And in this book, sociology book, urban ethnography book that was very celebrated, but also became very scandalous, the author is witness of a crime that for which she modified names, location, time, etc., but also managed to also accuse the Philadelphia police of brutality. And one of the consequences was that the Philadelphia police was was accusing Alice Goffman of lies and was trying to attack her and ask for elements on her sources, etc. So that's quite problematic. And so the question of accuracy, of truth, worthiness, etc., are of course like very often inevitable when we made those choices to obscure part of our data. Okay, so now after those detours, and Amina, I'm not sure where are we? What time is it?
It's 3:33.
Oh, okay. I'm very bad. This is, I'm the convener of the seminar. I should know that normally I ask people to talk for 20 minutes. Okay, so I'll be brief and give me 10 more minutes, and that will be it, I promise.
We're enjoying it. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, let me tell you about the work I've done. So this is a work that I started 20 years ago, almost 19 years ago. It was the subject of my dissertation that was entitled something Secret of Slavery, something like that. And also this is like something that I've come back to and struggle also to disseminate because it was about the secret. I'm going to give you a very little context. The site of my research was Anoush. So Anoush is a region, peripheral region in the southeast of Madagascar. Today it's very peripheral. It's very in the periphery, very like marginalized, but in the 17th century, it was the first site for the colonization of Madagascar, and a lot of the slaves or the enslaved Malagasy that were taken to the Cape Colony, to Cape Town, and to the Mascarenes, La Réunion or Mauritius, were from Fort-Dauphin, which is like little town, port town in Anoush. So this is a little marginal space that was very important in the history of the Indian Ocean. Very quickly, when the French first came, they were an established hierarchy that was dominated by Zaframinia, were like a dynastic group that were Muslim, that were white, like they were seen as white, and they had a privilege, or like the privilege is a terrible term, but to own slaves. They were at the top of the hierarchy and slave owners. When France recolonized Madagascar at the end of the 19th century, they came back to Anoush, and they also they abolished slavery, as they've done in many of the colonies. So that doesn't mean they also like instituted like forced labor. So that was not the end of things. But they abolished slavery 1896 in Madagascar, and after that, no more slaves. But in the decades that are following, we see that there's still stigmatization of the descendants of slaves. And today, in the 21st century, slaves are still called descendants of slaves, or called slaves. They are not called descendants of slaves, and they are still stigmatized for a reason, and their status is kind of essentialized. So that's kind of the context of what I found when I arrived in Anoush. How did I encounter the secret? This is like a map of Anoush. I lived in Fanzaira, this little town. I don't know if you see when I'm pointing. I lived in Malambarden, and both of places were former like Zaframinia, so dynastic capitals. I started like investigating on kings and slaves, asking very direct questions that were very rude because I didn't know, I was ignorant. And I was very quickly facing an enigma. I didn't know where the descendants of slaves, etc. Anyway, I became very obsessed and caught in that. And as a result of like this kind of involvement in looking for clarity and seeking the truth about the identity of slaves, I was able to like describe and analyze like a structure, pattern of interaction and circulation of knowledge about the status of individuals and groups. So my ethnography of secrecy, in the ethnography of secrecy, what was important wasn't the identity of the slaves. The important part was how the history and memory and reputation were assigning different categories of people to different status. So what was interesting was the transformation of the hierarchy and the new hierarchy that was created. That's what was important about it. So when I started writing about it, I tried to write. I tried to write about or in transparencies. That's what I said. I use the French term. That means I didn't have to reveal the secret of slavery. I had to say it existed and say, oh, it worked. Those were my my motivation and my goals. I dissimulated with a lot of care many informations. I made those decisions of using cryptonyms about descendants of slaves. My relationship to the secret also evolved in the last 10 years, and I'm not using the same cryptonyms. I'm having different strategies and different objectives. So there's a temporality to this relationship to the truth and to keeping the secret. I'm going to end with saying that, so there's definitely a politic of knowledge in those choices that we made when we rename and conceal informations. People writing on secret identities, such as descendants of slaves, have different reasons to speak about it or to conceal it. I know that it's also disciplinary orientation, like for anthropologists, the goal might be a little different than for historians that sometimes feel the urge to document a particular hierarchy. Historians work with archives where identities are named, so they already work with something that is explicit. They don't work with silences, or mostly. Something that I wanted to, and like I'm going to end here because it's late, but there's also frustration and something that is politically not satisfying with not disclosing everything about slavery, is that, you know, you fail to memorialize, you know, the pain, and also the pain of the ancestors and the pain of the people that are still stigmatized. You don't participate to liberation when you can't tell about what people are going through. So this is a price to pay to understand and hopefully understand better how slavery function in society as a reference, as a secret. But it's certainly like in the silence that we are committed to. There's a part of I don't know. There's a part of there's a part of failure. I don't want to sound too negative, but yeah. I'm going to end here. I had last slides on why ethnographers were con artists, but you know, we can do that maybe in the conversation. So thank you, Amina, and sorry for not following my own rules.
Not at all. Thank you so much, Dom. This was really incredible to listen to. I wish you could have spoken for the entire hour, and then, yeah, we will probably extend it if there are several questions to engage with. So thank you so much once more for your talk, and I especially appreciated the ways in which you spoke about the rituality of being an anthropologist. As a non-romanticized stance, and how we're really grounded into relationality, and that trust shouldn't be taken for granted. It's not a one-time offering, but it's negotiated, and it's constantly being given and taken back. So how to deal with those kind of situations. I will now ask if there is anyone who would like to ask a question or comment on the presentation. You can either raise your hand on the Zoom feature or through the Zoom feature, or pose your question in the chat, and we'll be sure to read it for you if that feels more comfortable. In the meantime, Dom, I do have a few questions, and the first one is related to codes of ethics. Codes of ethics are constantly being, not constantly, but every now and then we have codes of ethics that are being updated or republished. So is ethics constantly changing, or what is at stake when we have updated codes of ethics every time?
Thank you, Amina, for this question. Yes, do ethics change? Maybe sometimes they do. They have an history, and they are not universally valid and timelessly valid. But most of the time, when they change, like every 5-10 years, it's mostly that the strategies that are indicated or you know, and that are derived from the experience of the researcher. Like, so the strategies are modified, added. And also, as you know very well, because you are doing research on AI, on data, like technology change. And we need more and different strategies to, for example, maintain privacy. I'm not, I don't say anything that you don't know very well, but I think that part of that is, like, those changes and the experience of researchers.
Thank you so much. That's very true and quite spot on. And we do have a question from our director, Divine Fu. Divine, would you like to read your question?
I'm trying to be a technician. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dominique, for very interesting presentation and also engaging a subject that is really important. I have several questions. My first is just to make the distinction between ethics and reflexivity, because oftentimes we seem to conflate this, in the discipline. How are they related, and also how are they different? What makes them distinct, and how should we be conscious about this when we are planning for the field and writing and thinking? That's the first. The second is just also about ethical frameworks. I often think that ethical guidelines are instruments that were created to regulate particular kinds of bodies and particular kinds of experiences at particular moments. So regulating a white male body, for example, is very different from regulating a white female body. And regulating a white female body or somebody who is located in Oxford or Yale doing research is very different from regulating that same body at UCT or in Ouagadougou or in Douala. And it's just like, as anthropologists located in the South, how should we relate to these ethical instruments or these instruments of regulation, given that we have different kinds of bodies and different kinds of experiences, to data? And then the last is on the question of secrecy with data and secrecy in our work. And I'm just trying to see how that is related or distinct from the ethical requirements for confidentiality, for example, and privacy, because secrecy is also at the center of many of the crises of representation. But far back with Malinowski and Malinowski's notes, and others, the right to protect, to preserve our field note and to select particular kinds of data. So where are the fine lines, secrecy, privacy, confidentiality, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Many questions, as always. I'm always like witnessing, like Divine asking many questions. This time I'm the victim, but thank you. Okay, the first, like, ethics is different from reflexivity, or like ethics, or as I see it, reflexivity is practice, ethics are a set of norms. Reflexivity is, something that also you mentioned later about, the embodiment of the researcher, and like the situation, the location of the body of the researcher. Reflexivity is exactly on that. It's like, who is the subject of, who is like the author, who is like doing the interviews, who is writing, So reflexivity is asking who is the subject and how does it impact our interlocutors, what kind of power relationship we are part of, etc., etc. So reflexivity is how we check and check how we are not only like following codes of ethics, but how we are being moral human beings and acting morally. So I think reflexivity is important, you know, in addition to also checking like the biases that we have and ensuring the validity of our statement and our discourses. So yeah, like so the many like codes of ethics are produced like from different places. There are many indigenous codes of ethics that also emerge, and they come from the community that are subject to interviews and object of ethnographies. They don't look the same. They don't have the same preoccupations. I think codes of ethics have to be interrogated according to our own positionality. They are a starting point and kind of another interlocutor that we can have, but they are not the last words. They are not. They are not absolving us from engaging further in how to be like moral human beings, in addition to being like good and trustworthy authors. Yeah, I wonder, I think then you added something on secrecy and all like the semantic fields of privacy and confidentiality, etc. They have different definition according to different disciplines, like quantitative science are not using like those terms exactly in the same way. Secrecy, the way I see secrecy is something different than just confidentiality and privacy that are individual matters. Secrecy is some pact that a group share to maintain some elements in darkness and to organize their own circulation of knowledge. So it's a dynamic principle that organizes interaction. So I see that's something a bit different to engage with than just privacy and confidence. I think that's, I don't know if there's other question that I can answer to. I mean, help me because I see I see a few comments.
Exactly, we have a question from Rick Miller. Rick, would you like to ask your question or paraphrase it in short, or should I just go ahead and read it? Okay, Rick, it's here. Unmute. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, you can speak.
Hi there. Okay. Hi, nice to see you all. Thanks for the talk. Good to see you, Dom. We haven't caught up in a long time. So, and apologies, I'm in the middle of cooking. It's I'm on UAE time here. So the question I had was about we have this. We've talked about this a bit before about the co-creation of knowledge, right? Bringing our ethnographic subjects, kind of trying to change the politics of that relationship of the researcher and the subject by bringing them into the story and having them as part of the authorship. And how does one do this, or how do you kind of try to do both things of co-create the knowledge and bring authorship, or bring the subject into that story of being an author, and still kind of like the masking that's necessary for protecting identities and that that role of secrecy. So is there any kind of middle ground there?
So, yeah, thank you, Rick, and so happy to see you. Hope everything is well, like in Dubai. Okay, so next to Dubai, sorry. Yeah, like there's definitely tension. Like, how do you co-author? If co-authoring is also acknowledging the participation of others and not just having them be secret co-author, you can't do that if you're talking about secret. You don't write against people and against the people who who are the gatekeepers of the secret, you will do in collaboration with people. And something I was being late, so I didn't have the time to really like go deep into my ethnography, but there's also this idea that, okay, you are an intruder in the secret, but in many secrets, you are allowed to be an intruder because there's a desire also to clarify what the society is for you, right? And so there's a desire to unveil the secrets while still maintaining the veil. And so it's when I say it's a work of transparency, that's also what I meant. So you can, there's a lot of, there's things that can let appear, but certainly not the identity of the person who are transgressing the rules that are established about the secret. Like the secret of slavery in Madagascar is an open secret. So everybody is, almost everybody, not everybody that's categorized, but almost everybody is transgressing it at some point. But the rules is maintained, right? So you have to share without saying that you share and without admitting that you share. So people won't say, do not speak about that, but certainly they don't expect that their name is going to be in the book, right? That's a convention that is very, yeah, so that's a limitation. That's a limitation of writing on secret. You don't disclose the name of folks. If people wanted to, I would have done it, but that's not a possibility. But the one thing that I have done in my work on secret is also analyzing really like closely, like all of those relations of the interaction between foreigners and insiders, between like people who own the secret, who maintain the secret, people who are authorized as confident. So there's like many positions that exist in this kind of configuration of secrecy.
Do you think that it has something to do with, and this will be like the last piece of it, but that there are secrets that for the insider or for within that closed group are more damaging, but actually that maybe your subjects feel like, it's fine for the wider world to know about this, just as long as it doesn't reach my own social circle. In other words, where the boundary is, that ironically it's okay for this in a much larger context, but not okay, and that's where the secret has to be drawn, is within the very local community, so that naming outside of the social group is okay, inside is not okay, like maybe some kind of geographic bounds or social bounds that way.
So thank you. That's very interesting, and there's part of that. And as an ethnographer, I different from other kind of societies who are really like not part of the secret. Right, so there's like a lot of distinction, but certainly there's something like that, and even to go further, like the secret, that would be like, I think that's true in other places. Some people want you to know about this secret, and the people who are more interested in letting people know that the secret exists, not saying it's a secret, or the people who used to own slaves. So the Zaframinia, the noble. Because their nobility and their reputation and their absence from the status of slaves or descendants of slaves is based on that recognition that they used to own slaves. The slaves were literally like the body of the kings. They were making the sacrality of the kings. So when you say, we have a secret, don't tell, it's bad, but we have a secret, we own slaves. And people say that, exactly with that ambiguity. It's shameful, it was unchristian, but we own slaves. We were not like them, we were not like ordinary people. So there's a necessity of unveiling. And there's another that I don't want to, there's another André Zampleni was written a lot on the ritual secret, and he's also saying that there's a kind of like thermodynamics of the secret. A secret exists because it's secreted. So the secret can't just be like, like this on bubble and never exploding. So it has to explode just according to rules. And sometimes, secreting towards others that are not part of the group, it's also part of this like thermodynamics of secrets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Dom. And I'm curious, Dom, about how long it actually took you when you were doing your fieldwork in Madagascar to realize that some conversations were part of that secret. And I think it ties somewhat to Vanessa's question. Vanessa, would you like to read your question and unmute yourself, which is on ethics and the ethical code of the community being different to that of the researcher, or not different, but that it's not part of what the researcher knows. And in such instances, do researchers, or does the researcher's own stance go out of the window? Are ethics negotiable? And have you experienced moments like these in your work? And if so, could you please provide examples, which is when conducting research in spaces that are unfamiliar, it's sometimes possible that this space has an ethical code that isn't necessarily known to the researcher. So how long does it take for one to understand the ethics and code of the space where we're doing research?
Thank you. I mean, and thank you, Vanessa, for this question. It's a very interesting question. Indeed, like not knowing like what are the codes is something that is like unavoidable, but also quite stressful. And you have to be quite perceptive to make this period of ignorance as short as possible. But there's a lot of lesson to be learned. The problem is like you don't want to harm, and you don't want to cause people to be embarrassed, to be ashamed, to be, feel like they're, seen in a certain way. So an example is that I think I gave like in passing is that, I was asking very abrupt questions, as when I arrived, I would, visit every, there were like 3,000 people in Manamba. I would like, enter every house with research assistant. And I would ask very direct questions about origin of people and their status. And I can't believe, for me, like 20 years later, I'm ashamed of myself. Like, of course, I didn't know that there was a secret. I should have known that there's certain question you don't ask, but I didn't know that. I didn't know how to not offend. So it took me a few weeks to understand that what I was doing wasn't appropriate. And I had very when I look back at my notes from those interviews, like when I have asked like people who were like suspected allegedly, because those people are not necessarily like descendants of slaves, but they are believed to be descendants of slaves. So that's a big difference. But when I have asked like some of those, some elders in the group, like about, their tomb, I was a bit indirect. I'm mean with myself. I was a bit indirect, but I would ask questions that I could not ask today. For example, you can't like asking a descendant of slave or an alleged descendant of slave where their tomb is. It's very abrupt and offending, because the answer is, my tomb is wherever the king tomb was, right? So I didn't know violence was the question, and I had to learn, because and it's very painful, because I remember seeing pain. I didn't know that asking about location of tomb, it was, for me, it was just like biographical information. So those things are painful to ask, and painful to realize that you may have like, you may have caused like pain in to somebody. It's very, and I wish I could know before knowing, but I didn't. So, and I think Vanessa, what the question was more complex, but that's what I can think of now. I'm sorry, Vanessa. You can ask other question later. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you for that. I would just like to tell everyone that we've paused the 5 p.m. South African time mark, and we'd love to extend for another 5 to 7 minutes, just so that we can cover the last question and congratulate Dom for the seminar and say thank yous. There's a last question or the last question that I see, please feel free to send any question that you have, is from Julia. Julia, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question in person? Okay. So are you able to unmute? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. So I was wondering, when you were talking earlier about changing biographical information, kind of how you gauge when the exclusion of certain things that are particular to someone's identity or positionality that really impact the way they experience the world or their circumstances, like when the omission of that kind of starts to cancel out the value of what could have been added to the ethnography.
Thank you, Julia. And I want to say Julia is a former student and we travel the world together. So we know each other well. So yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think that's the problem. I think that in the case I can think about for my own ethnography, there was a specific something that I wanted to say about that enabled me to explain why, in the context of the secret of slavery, you might not know in certain circumstances or might not be sure about your own origin. And that was something that I wanted the reader to understand as I was understanding it. So I wanted to give a very precise examples and detailed example of how that could happen. The fact that nobody is talking in front of you about your origin might make it difficult for you to understand fully the reputation that you have. That's something that is complicated. That's something that I could feel, I was sure of because of the specific example, but I could not, this is a situation where I could not say, and I could absolutely not have the person who was probably going to read me, I could not have him even know it was about themselves. I say he, so sorry, I'm messing that up now, but so it's a decision that I made that a lot of ethnographers are making that is not very satisfying for exactly the very good reason that you are giving. Like, how that you know, and because also you're making a choice based on your own interpretation. Somebody might have a totally different interpretation, and it's only fair to give the reader the ability to decide for themselves if you are analyzing that right or not. And if you good so little details, or if you give distorted biography, or is the reader going to understand if the reason for the people to act the way they do is what you say, So yeah, I don't like it, and I don't like that people can, doubt and feel like you're not trustworthy because you might have changed all of the gender of the people you're talking about. That's not satisfying at all. So that's not something that I would recommend. Exactly. I agree with you. Most of the time, if you feel you can't tell a story, just don't tell the story. Do not change the biography. So yeah. Basically, you're right.
Thank you, Dom. If there are no other questions, I would just like to thank you and to say that I particularly found the part on cryptonyms incredibly facilitating the action of reading. I think that really calls for adopting different layers of reading and approaching the reading of ethnographies as a more intimate practice, and not assuming that we understand what we're reading by virtue of what's written basically in the lines of the paper. And I think perhaps if you hadn't explained that, I might have read your work differently. And I'm wondering, yeah, I think for everyone who's interested in Dom's work, you should be able to find it on academia, on ResearchGate, online. She's published very widely. And I don't know, Dom, if you would like to guide us to a particular reading of yours that you would recommend for us to read. I think that would be wonderful.
I don't, I've just like finished like a text on Secret and Archive that I like, but it's going to be published in a little, maybe a few months. That I think it's a short text that I think will capture like some of what I've said. I'm still working on my book, because one of the consequences of like of writing about secret is that take a lot of time to figure out how you're going to do it and make those like ethical and political choices about disclosing aspect of the secret. So yeah, that's the best is yet to come.
We love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dom, for this insightful conversation. And thank you for convening this seminar, and much gratitude to Angelique, who wasn't able to be here. My hope and your hope, I think, as a convener of the seminar, is that participants would leave this space having really learned much from your experience and your work, and that this would be part of a much and grander thinking about truth telling as a commitment as social scientists and anthropologists to the communities we work with. Dom, is there any last word that you would like to share?
Yes, first, like many thanks, Amina, because you were present and you helped me, because I would have been very embarrassed to ask questions to myself, and also, as you've seen, I'm bad with with like being not be on time. So thank you for that, Amina. You always available and ready to help. So thank you so much. So I have an announcement as the convener. So next session is going to be the 1st of December. And we are going to receive my colleague and friends that is also going to talk about Madagascar. So Madagascar is in the house. So the guest is Seth Palmer, assistant professor of anthropology, and his talk is entitled "Being Pilgrims, Being Guests, Balancing Peregrine and Landed Experiences in the Doctoral Research Journey." So it's, again, I hope it's going to be like a helpful seminar for doctoral students who are like really like the audience, the target audience of the seminar. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dom. You're so humble, and I'm so honored to have hosted you today. We also have different seminars upcoming this week that you can check on the HEMA website and calendar. Some of the talks are on artificial intelligence and on the African free trade area on Friday. So please keep an eye on those, and we look forward to seeing you next week and this week. Take care. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.